Hey guys, Chris Allen here from Rev 5. Wanted to talk about one of the concepts that we have that we kind of use as a marketing term, but I think is a little bit more important than that. And it's really this concept of the speed of thought. It's one of our goals or aspirations at Rev 5 is to always see if we can target this speed of thought, which is really the human perception of latency. And if you think about it, we have latency, like our reaction time. They always use this example of somebody in a race, a professional athlete. Here's the pop of the gun, and then the amount of time it takes them to react to that and then start running. Even the most, fine-tuned professionals, they'll get this down to maybe 150 milliseconds. Most of us are around 250. And then there's things like eye focus, the time it takes from, scanning the room to somewhere else out in the distance, that can be like 200 milliseconds or more. Even just moving your head, these kind of mechanics, they all add up. And, these things add hundreds of milliseconds to the reaction time. And then so, I think one of the things that we get really focused on as technologists is this concept of lowering it as much as possible. But the truth is, really, what we want to accomplish is getting it so that people can't perceive any latency and it feels like real time. And so that's, always been our goal. And, there's lots of use cases where this stuff is really important. In stadium streaming, we just recently had a customer who's looking for a soccer stadium use case where they want to have all the televisions in the venue basically be synced with the game out on the field. And, they were targeting this, I think, kind of an arbitrary number of 100 milliseconds. And, they were having some difficulties with, their encoder and some other stuff that was just kind of getting them in this like range of 400 milliseconds. But when we started talking about it, it's like by the time even this, the sound of the game gets to the person, like maybe 100 milliseconds has passed. By the time they look up at the TV and then refocus, they're probably perfectly in sync, and it's going to be the perception is going to be it's perfect, right? And then speaking of the speed of sound, that is one of the factors, and this is why. Lip sync in stadium use cases, like getting the lip sync of a singer going with the monitor in the venue is like so tricky. The classic example of the speed of sound is like the thunder and lightning, right? You always see the lightning first, and then you hear the thunder soon after, and that's because the speed of sound. Traveling in dry air at 20 degrees Celsius is about 343 meters per second. And so that's actually significant. And this is why stadium sound engineers, they deliberately add delay to the audio. So as it kind of gets further and further back in the venue at an arena like that, they'll delay the audio to get sent to the end user. And so, these are just all examples of where these kind of things are a factor. Speaking of stadiums, we've been partnering with a Mino on some really cool use cases for like remote monitoring, and like their media player is a really cost-effective thing that can be hooked up into TVs. We've been doing this for like courtroom use cases and like all kinds of venues, and not just stadiums. Being able to monitor what's happening outside of a courtroom with the televisions, and then also streaming that to end users at home. But then these like that soccer stadium example that I explained to you is one of them. I should also call out Osprey Video, who's been making really fantastic encoders, and one of the ones we've been testing with the Talon 4K. That gets its frame level encoding of H.264 at like 16.67 milliseconds. So it's one frame out. And that really cuts down on the latency. So, some of the encoders we've tried, they're adding hundreds of milliseconds. So, just a big shout out to those guys as well. Anyway, like I said, we're trying to design all of this stuff for human beings, because that's who's going to be using it, and not just basing it on numbers, right? And so, yeah, I hope you guys are all having good. For those of you in the US, have a fantastic Thanksgiving this week too. Talk soon.